And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 76th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 404th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, May 17th, 2018. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call, how we begin every episode of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes a shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment continues the recruiting theme from last week's banner moment. There's a lot of that when you get into the offseason. And last week, of course, I ran down the list of high-profile five-star players in the class of 2019 that Indiana is heavily involved with. You know the names: Trace, Keon, Trendon, Hurt, etc. Well, on Thursday afternoon, 24/7 Sports released their updated rankings, and it makes Indiana's current recruiting board look even more impressive because not only did Keon Brooks and Trace Jackson Davis maintain their five-star status, both guys actually moved up in the rankings after impressive showings so far this spring. Keon is now number 9 in the class, while Trace is number 21. In addition, 3 of Indiana's point guard targets, who had previously been 4-star players, made huge jumps in the rankings, and a couple of them earned their 5th stars. DJ Carton jumped 14 spots to number 23. He has Indiana in his final 6, with the Hoosiers assumed to be in the top 3 by most accounts that I've heard. Kira Lewis, an AAU teammate of Trendon Watford's, who I love, jumped 24 spots to number 24. He has yet to cut his list, but has mentioned wanting to make a trip to Bloomington. And Jameis Ramsey, another IU guard target, is just outside 5-star status and moved up 6 spots to number 36. In summation, Indiana projects to have 3 scholarships available for the 2019 class, and it's not totally unreasonable to think that they could put together a 3-man class comprised of some combination of the 6th, 9th, 17th, 21st, 23rd, 24th, and 36th ranked prospects. Time will tell what this class ends up becoming, but the signs continue to be positive for Archie Miller and the Hoosiers. All right, let me now introduce my esteemed co-hosts for this week's show. To my left, he is one of the world's most respected bracketologists and the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club. He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your bottoms line on the last week in IU basketball?
Well, I know we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but I was really excited to see the bastion of integrity that is Rick Pitino step out and really enforce the law on those who have wronged him, and his memory that he somehow could never find when he was in charge of a program and watched all kinds of things go on right under his nose without being even remotely aware of it. Apparently is now policing the recruiting scene. So really glad to see he's found gainful employment doing that in the it
was good to hear from Rick, wasn't it, guys?
Yeah,
I missed it.
Yeah, well, he hadn't called his own press conference or found some way to put himself out there in a couple weeks, so it was time. But I think honestly, the one thing about this, I'll kind of keep the IU piece of it aside. I think what this shows, as much as anything, in addition to reaffirming everything that you probably already thought about Rick Pitino, is that, when you go back to all these things the NCAA has come out with, it just underscores the fact that what they've come out with really doesn't address the ultimate issue that is at play here. And that's the worth of these guys to the shoe companies and to all the other people that are involved with it. And very little of what they discussed seemed to really grasp that is the root of the issue, and being able to, actually do something for themselves to, take advantage of that worth in that time. That's ultimately the problem, and leads to these kinds of things, which in this case is not really against any rule that I am aware of. But it just, again, it just underscores the fact that I think the NCAA ruling, which I don't know that we really talked about in here, it just kind of missed the mark in terms of addressing the real root cause of the issue. And while this one hit a little bit close to home from an IU perspective, I think as you step back and look at it nationally, it just goes to show there's a long way to go between what the NCAA came out with and where it actually needs to get to in order to address the issues that are going to cause things like this, and who knows what else may come out over the course of time, and the kinds of things that we've already seen come out in the last year.
And now, to my right, he is a man who is fairly certain he could earn a start for the Cleveland Cavaliers in their series against the Celtics if only he was given the chance. He's a columnist for The Big Lead, and he is someone who recently admitted to Kent Sterling that he grew up wanting to be a race car driver.
I legitimately wanted to be a race car driver.
Until he realized that doing so would mean being in a car and wearing a helmet, thus obscuring his face during competition, a fate he considered too cruel to inflict on all of his future female fans, which is why he chose hyper-niche internet broadcasting on YouTube instead. He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what is your rant this week?
You spend way too much of your week on the intro and the music for me, really, honestly. I gotta, I mean, you know, when that windbag stuffed leathery sack of skin slithered out from its hole and made those comments to the Washington Post. I'm referring to Rick Pitino, by the way. He just, I mean,
that was clear, but
I just making sure for the people who don't, you know, haven't seen him in person. Somebody knocked on his coffin and woke him up. It's honestly, he's just, I don't know what Pitino is doing. And I love that everybody made this point. It's like he's so aware of what was going on with the recruitment of Romeo Langford, yet he had no idea what was going on with his own program. As far as that article goes, it felt to me, and the Post is a great outlet, great news outlet. They break a lot of great sports and news stories and are you know, it's a wonderful paper. But that felt to me like they thought they had a huge scoop and that they got Rick Pitino talking and then wound up with nothing. And that happens in journalism sometimes. You think you got a big deal and then it's not a big deal. And that's what it felt like. And, you know, the story is basically that Romeo's dad had shoe companies bidding to sponsor his AAU team, which every AAU team does, is puts their teams up for sponsorships. That is not, whether you think that's shady or not, it's not illegal. That is what all those teams do. And so this is such a non-story, and it was pitched as, and certain people like Bob Kravitz are out there saying, well, no, that makes sense why he went to Indiana. Well, it had nothing to do with Indiana. It had to do with Adidas and his dad's AAU team, which again is fully legal. And so I really didn't understand what the big deal was about that piece. If there's more to it, certainly it's worth investigating. But from what was reported, it just seemed like Rick Pitino trying to now be a whistleblower and try to regain his reputation, which is forever shot, in my opinion.
Agreed. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here coming up. In fact, these are the topics and some of the questions we will address this week. We will talk a little bit more about this Washington Post story about Romeo Langford. If there's any reason to be concerned, clearly, as Andy and Ryan have discussed, there isn't. We will then begin our offseason player-by-player breakdown series, starting with Devonte Green. That should be a fun, lively conversation. And then we will close by answering some questions. And you all send in some good ones again this week, as you always do. All of that coming here on Assembly Call Radio. I do want to take one last opportunity to talk to you about our friends at Mecum Auctions, because the exciting auction event that they are hosting in Indianapolis, which we've been telling you about over the last few weeks, is now happening. What is it? Well, it's a fantastic event for any car lover and for any families who are looking for something fun to do together. Mecum Auctions is hosting their 31st original Spring Classic Car Auction at the Indiana State Fairgrounds right now through May 20th. So it started Tuesday and goes through this upcoming Sunday. What will you find at this Mecum auction? 2,000 classic and collector cars, everything from muscle cars and race cars to classics and exotics. Oh, and there will be some big name sports tie-ins too. Hall of Famer Reggie Jackson, Mr. October, will be selling 18 cars from his private collection. And Mecum will also be offering the green 1967 Corvette that was gifted to Bart Starr for winning the Super Bowl I MVP award. Gates open daily at 7:30 a.m. Tickets and bidder registration is available at Mecum.com. Again, it's Mecum's 31st original Spring Classic Car Auction at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, going on now through Sunday, May 20th. Go to Mecum.com for more information.
Thank you.
Okay, you are listening to the Assembly Call. I am Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And guys, let's just wrap up this segment with any more thoughts about this Washington Post article, which you guys have given your thoughts on it. I agree completely. I thought Bob Kravitz's take in particular was just awful. I mean, he got,
frankly, it was irresponsible for somebody who
was.
purports to be a journalist. I mean, you can't. He clearly didn't read the story or understand the NCAA rules to make that comment.
No, and the other thing is, the thing that happens that we've learned now with Marvin Bagley and maybe with this, although we don't know, is a lot of times the shoe companies will pay for these AAU teams, and these AAU teams have a lot of expenses. Like, it's expensive to fly around and stay in hotels for all of the guys on these teams. But I guess what happens is sometimes they pay extra, and over and above the amount of the expenses, and then the coaches can keep that, which is typically the parent of the star player. And I saw that insinuated in the Washington Post article about the Langfords, but there's no proof of it whatsoever at all. So that in and of itself is irresponsible, to just kind of make that assumption and cast aspersions without there being any real proof of it. And then for someone like Kravitz to just in the middle of the article go, is it illegal? No. Is it wrong? No. But it sure is dirty. In fact, it's really dirty. And it's like, based on what? And he ends it by saying, instead of, spelling out character, the pastor should have spelled out cash at the announcement ceremony, which was just, I mean, it was awful. It was cheap, lazy, and hypocritical for anybody to have a take like that. So
yeah, no, let me just explain something to people who don't understand how this works, because you were sort of talking about the expenses and stuff like that. What these shoe companies do is they will sponsor an AAU team, and it's so the kids don't have to pay to play, and they don't have to pay to travel and things like that. Now, can they develop a relationship with a player through that? They can, to say like, oh yeah, I'm an Adidas guy because my AAU team was an Adidas thing, and then I feel more comfortable in Adidas school or whatever. That's what they're hoping for. Now, in some cases, they've just handed cash to players. We found out about that before last season. But what happens a lot of times is, they give them a budget to spend from, and it's for travel, it's for hotels, as Jerod said, expenses, tournament sign-up fees, things like that. And then if there's money left over, they can have a salary for the coaches. They can, have maybe like a team trip somewhere, whatever. Usually these are nonprofit.
Fully loaded Lexus.
Hopefully not. But there's expenses, and then they can do like a team trip somewhere or something like that. These are usually nonprofit businesses. And so at the end of the year, they have to zero out pretty much. And so whatever's left over is usually like a bonus for the coach and other stuff like that. Now, of course, if you're giving $500,000 to an AAU team, you're probably expecting something in return. But as long as that's not spelled out, and as long as there's not a known quid pro quo there's no, I mean, even if there is, it's nothing dirty about it. A kid can decide to go to an Adidas school because he likes the shoes if he wants. There's nothing there. If you're paying direct money to parents or to players, that's a different story. But if you're just funding an AAU team, there's nothing illegal about that. Should there be? I don't know. That's not my area to decide that, but it is completely legal within the rules. And it doesn't look like, and nothing in that article, showed that the Langfords are doing anything illegal or wrong. And
certainly there's nothing to show that Indiana or Archie Miller have.
No, Indiana's not even attached to it. Indiana's only association was that it's an Adidas school, and he had an Adidas deal with his AAU team. So, and then Romeo's 3 finalists were Adidas schools. So Indiana's just as, if you're going to say Indiana's dirty, they're just as dirty as Kansas or Vanderbilt, because it was the exact same thing. They were all Adidas schools. So
if you're going to be recruiting at the highest levels, you're probably going to be recruiting players who are the signature guy on their AAU team, who might have a family member running an AAU program. But also, let's remember, Al Durham's father, ran his AAU program. So anyway, Andy, do you have anything else on this? I just wanted to take a few minutes and just make sure that we were clear that this, this really is a non-story in a lot of ways. The story really is how irresponsibly it's been reported, I think.
Yeah. I mean, again, to assume that there's no ulterior motive to what, Adidas folks are doing in scenarios like this, I mean, is naive. And I don't think anybody's saying otherwise.
Yeah.
But that's the reality of the situation that's in. If you cannot make, you're making it illegal for these guys to get paid, to get whatever, then somebody is going to find a way to circumvent that system. And it has been, doesn't make it right. You don't have to like it, but that's the way that the system works, has worked for a number of prominent guys. And again, to your point, there's nothing illegal about it. There's nothing that IU is doing with it, but again, I mean, any big time player who has played for one of the major shoe circuits, like it's not the correlation between the kind of school that they go to and the kind of shoes that they wear and who sponsors their program is pretty darn high. So, I'm not going to sit here and say, they just wanted to help fund that program out of the goodness of their hearts. Certainly, as Ryan said, they're hoping down the road that some association and whatever is formed. But yeah, to suggest that IU somehow was involved or whatever seems kind of silly to me. And again, I think it just underscores the point that the NCAA is going to continue to miss the mark if they don't recognize the fact that these guys are worth that kind of money to be able to try to secure them. If you're doing anything that addresses issues other than that, you're not really addressing the issue at all.
Yep. Ryan, did you want to add something real quick?
Yeah, I mentioned that Vanderbilt was an Adidas school. They're a Nike school. I just wanted to clear that up because I misspoke there. They are a Nike school.
So what you're saying is if you misstate something and it's pointed out, you should clear the record as quickly as possible.
Oh God, we're gonna get Jerod off on a tangent.
I know the only thing that Kravitz could have done different was to invoke the Abraham Lincoln comment, and Jerod's head would have just
exploded. I was primed to get upset about that, but he didn't include that.
Hey, we have a website on which you could write about that if you wanted, Jerod.
Pretty sure I did. Pretty sure I did already.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Are we ready to break here? Let's do this. Okay. So coming up, we are going to begin our offseason player-by-player breakdown. We start with Devonte Green, whose maturation will be critical for Indiana to reach its ceiling this upcoming season. And is there reason to Gulp believe a breakthrough is coming? Maybe there is. Stick with us. We'll talk about it. All righty. Hello, everybody who is watching live. Thank you for being here. I know we're live on Facebook and on YouTube. For some reason, Periscope didn't work tonight.
I mean, for us, sometimes it doesn't work, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird.
I think it goes down a lot.
Yeah.
Because they're,
Yeah, we just won't rely on it.
Yeah, it's great if it goes on. You know what? That'll be good for post-game shows, I think, more than
yes, it will be.
Our scheduled shows.
Yeah,
because scheduled shows you figure people are going to seek out and find, whereas Periscope in the aftermath of a game will pop up on people's feeds while they're doing that. So
I agree.
I was going to say, dude, you should write about Kravitz for the website. I'm not saying start a media feud. But you clearly have thoughts on it.
I do. I think about that sometimes because I put him on Twitter and I could have just taken that time and actually written a quick blog post about it.
And then you can tweet, do like a one of those quote tweets of your article and let out what you're saying. I would do it, man. Yeah.
Especially when it's that bad and that
it was so bad.
Takes are consistently uninformed and terrible, and it really feels like he's just.
It's been that way since I was in college.
Well,
I mean,
I guess I didn't pay that much attention.
That just felt like I need to write something about this. I don't actually have anything original to say. I'm going to attempt to connect some dots that aren't there.
Yeah,
and try to be semi-controversial, and then call it a day.
So
I'm glad Zach followed up and wrote something that was actually sensible.
Yeah, no, he completely did. And of course, Zach's always super sensible with stuff like that. That's the one thing I do love about Zach. He's like the anti-hot take guy.
Yes.
It's like one way or the other. He's just going to throw cold water on everything, positive, negative, whatever.
Yeah.
He's just super sensible. But should I tell my Kravitz story to the YouTube audience or no?
You want to do it in between? Maybe we'll do it next segment. Let's do it in between the next segment.
We'll tease it a little. Yeah.
I'm assuming you don't want it to go on the radio. You'd rather this be for the private audience?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, yes.
I mean, it's only on Facebook and YouTube. Nobody's going to watch it, right? It's just between us right here.
Yes, just us. All right. Just us. All right.
You guys can start the next segment. I'm just going to fill up my water. I'll hop in. I mean, I'll mute.
Yeah, I have a bit of a prepared statement to kick this one off.
Is it on the doc? Yeah,
it's on the document. If I feel like if it starts to drag, just interrupt me, and I might stop anyway. But we'll see how this goes. I probably will. I probably won't say the whole thing.
Okay, just hold on. I'll mute myself.
Don't worry, Ryan will interrupt you anyway. It's fine.
I know. How long did he say he's going to be gone?
I don't know.
Oh, did he want us to start?
He did, but I think he was just going to get water. So whatever you want to do. He's
right.
muted, so you can get started if you want.
He is muted. Okay, let's get started. Let's get moving here. All right, here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. Quick note, if you ever have to miss all or part of an episode of Assembly Call Radio, there are two great ways to catch up. You can subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Assembly Call. Or if you are a truly dedicated Hoosier and Assembly Call fan, you can watch our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and participate in the live chat on YouTube. You'll get all of the between segment banter that doesn't make it into the radio or podcast edit. So that's a nice little bonus. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/assembly call. All right, gentlemen, we are going to talk about Devonte Green. And I guess the reason why I wanted to kick things off with him for our offseason player-by-player series is something kind of funny happened on this week's episode of Podcast on the Brink with Alex Bozich, where, someone asked us who we expected to be the breakout player from this year's team. And the obvious answer is Justin Smith. I think everybody expects a huge breakout from him. We will obviously have an episode dedicated to him. So that was my answer, but I didn't want to just, give the same answer Alex gave. So I said, it's kind of one of those things that, you don't necessarily want to say like in public in front of other people. And yet when you're a podcast host, kind of have to do that.
Like how much you loved Verdell Jones.
So I kind of let it slip that I've been having some optimistic thoughts about Devonte Green for a few reasons. And I kind of went into some of those reasons and I got done. And I expected Alex to just smack me down and be like, dude, you remember how inconsistent he's been. You realize that you're talking about all this stuff and him breaking out and, succeeding with the additional pressure now of having Robert Fennessy behind him. Like, you realize that goes in the face with the 2 years of evidence that we have where he can play pretty well, but then be inconsistent, and we just don't know what to expect from him. That's what I expected Alex to say. But instead, Alex was like, you know what? I kind of agree with you. He's like, he's been around this summer. He really seems committed. People were kind of talking that maybe he'd be a transfer guy, but none of that has come up at all. And so we kind of had this moment where it's like we both were kind of having some faith in Devonte Green. So I wanted to bring this to you guys and see what you guys think. And look, I've got some numbers here. We're going to go over what he did well, what he did poorly in the next segment. And you can see here on the sheet, I've got all these numbers, talking about, his inconsistencies and then some factors that I think play into him possibly having a breakout. But before I even get into that, just that general thought, like your general confidence level in thinking Devonte now is an upperclassman, a guy that we can count on. Is that notion even something that you're willing to entertain? Ryan, why don't you go first?
I think there's a possibility of that, of a breakout. And I would lean more towards a breakout than a complete dud of a season. One thing that I think was super positive about him was that he stepped up in a lot of bigger games, which are games where the team needed to win, not necessarily against the biggest opponents, but games where the team needed to win. And he got playing time. He stepped up, and that's encouraging to me. And it's a guy who answers that means the guy answers the bell when he's needed.
He is consistently, his numbers are consistently better against Indiana's tier A and B opponents. So his numbers are actually dragged down by the worst opponents on Indiana's schedule.
Which suggests to me a little bit of a lack of focus, but that's immaturity. And that's the kind of thing that you can get rid of. I think there were times last year where I felt like Devonte was, other than Juwan Morgan, the most complete player on the team as far as doing it on both ends. And then at times I felt like he was the biggest disappointment. I got Troy Williams flashbacks, basically. And he's got so much ability that you just feel like at some point that has to rise to the surface. At some point that has to rise to the surface and win out. And so I have faith that he will turn things around and will be better. And I maybe the reason why I feel better about it is because Indiana doesn't need him to. And maybe that's what's going to cause it, because Indiana has more talent at the guard spots. Maybe that's why I feel like it's going to cause him to maybe have some pressure lifted and maybe relax and maybe focus, or maybe feel like he could lose his job and therefore he's got to step up.
Yeah, well, or just the thought that maybe the upgraded offensive and just general basketball talent around him will turn some of his misfire passes from last year into buckets. Because when you've got better basketball players on the receiving end of some of those passes that he tries to make, got a greater likelihood of them possibly being completed. So that could help him too. And that's that's the other number that I thought was impressive from last year when you look at it. His assist rate nearly doubled as a sophomore, and his turnover rate decreased by 6%. So he made a lot of growth in those two areas from where he was as a freshman. Now, all of his shooting numbers fell, but those two numbers, which are so important for his success, both improved by a lot. And it'll obviously be interesting to see if he can do that then as a junior. Andy, what are your general thoughts on the notion of a Devonte breakout as a junior?
I think the thing that makes me most optimistic about it is, and you alluded to it a little bit, was the assist rate was really good. And I think where he got himself into trouble last season was some of the shots that he would take and kind of trying to figure out how much offense he really needed to create on his own. So on a team that didn't really have a guy who could create his own shot, in large part, we would talk about that a lot he was a guy that needed to play because he was one of the only guys that could do that. If you spin forward to this year, is that really the case anymore? And can he really just focus on being a distributor and scoring occasionally, but not trying to feel like he had to get himself going on a team that was offensively challenged? It didn't have a lot of guys that can consistently make outside shots. So did he put additional pressure on himself to, try to do that at times? I think it's fair to question some of the shots that he took at times that were, kind of getting caught up either in a one-on-one matchup with somebody or feeling like I've got to make this shot. Somebody needs to do something. I think I would expect we would see less of that next year.
He was trying to be a combo guard and not a point guard. And I think that was a big part of the problem.
Yeah. So if he can truly just be a point guard this year and really accentuate the fact that he was able to get those turnover numbers down and was able to improve his assist numbers, I think that is to me, that's as big a reason for optimism as anything. The skeptical part of me says, it's great to think about that and to want that, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it consistently enough. So how do we know that that's going to be the case? And that's, kind of where probably you expected Alex to throw some of the cold water on your thoughts that if there's any reason to do it, for me, that's it for sure. Look, we've seen him for 2 years. Is he able to flip that switch? Cause we haven't seen that level of consistency and we didn't see it last year. And so that for me is the biggest reason to be pessimistic if you want to look at it the other way.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, doing our off-season player-by-player breakdown. We're talking about Devonte Green and the notion of him possibly breaking out as a junior. And Andy, that's a good point. And that's the thing with Devonte. It's like for every good, there's a bad. And when you start looking at the numbers, it's kind of the same thing. You start looking through his game log from last year, and on the one hand, finally, in late January and February, you saw some consistent play. So it's not like we just saw a flash in one game and then nothing for a couple games. Like we actually saw him put together a sequence of pretty good play for, about a month. Like that was pretty strong and relatively consistent. It wasn't all perfect, but it was much better. And so, you see it. And that's the thing. Now, maybe he's a little bit older. Maybe he's more comfortable in the system. Maybe with better players around him, that's something that he can do more of, and he can extend those segments of good play. But at the same time, you look back through there, and from January 2nd through the end of the season, he had more games in which he scored 2 or 0 points than games in which he scored in double figures. He had 5 games of 2 or 0 points, and then 3 games in double figures. So there's the inconsistency. We talk about the improvement in the assist and turnover rate, but his overall offensive rating actually fell from 100.6 in 2017 to 91.7 in 2018, which isn't good. So that's the thing, is everywhere you turn, when you look at Devonte and what he's done already as a Hoosier, there's some good, but then you're immediately met with some bad. And so now it's just, can he smooth out some of those rough edges, become more consistent? And, Ryan, he would not be the first player who, especially for a guy who came in as a 3-star recruit, not a blue chip guy, to take a few years to get comfortable, build up his strength, build up his confidence, build up, just continuity in the system, and then to really emerge as an upperclassman. I mean, we see that happen a lot in college basketball. And so, you add those things up, and I'm starting to lean more towards the side of having some legitimate confidence in it happening. It's, 55-45. I mean, we've seen enough of the struggles to, you don't want to jump in with 2 feet, but I'm starting to feel legitimately confident, legitimately better about what Indiana can get from him next year than maybe where I was at the end of the year.
No, I'd agree with you. I think that there is some, there's reason for hope. And I think that at this point of the year, that's what you're looking for. And again, a lot of it's on Devonte. He's going to have to spend this summer working his butt off, getting better, really dedicating himself to the weight room and to, getting better at the offense, understanding the offense better and deciding what his role is going to be too, with sitting down with Archie Miller and deciding what his role is going to be. Is he going to be more of a combo guard, is going to try and gun for shots, or is he a guy who is going to distribute for others, and then when they find him open in a corner or on the wing, hits a shot? So I think that it's a lot of that. They have to define his role and figure out what he wants to be and what Archie needs him to be, and go from there. But there were games this year that he was the driving force behind the team winning, and that is encouraging. Now it's about bottling those up, watching the film on the bad games, figuring out what he was doing wrong, and maybe just reining in his game a little bit. Because when he simplified things, man, he was really good. It was when he tried to do too much and when he tried to be the offense by himself that it was the problem, I thought.
And Andy, one question that we get a lot is, just something that I've seen, on Twitter and the message boards is, kind of this assumption that Robert Fennessy will take over as point guard at some point during the season, and that we'll be better off if that happens. Look, if Robert Fennessy comes in and he's just so good that, he's going to start and be a legitimate Big Ten player right from day one, like, that's great. You can never have enough, great players. And if we can find someone to solidify that spot from his freshman year, that's awesome. But I continue to think that this Indiana team at its best next year is with a more mature, consistent Devonte as a starter, as the guy playing the majority of the minutes, and you allow Robert Fennessy to kind of ease into it, and not have that much pressure right away. So I'm not buying into the notion that he's automatically going to be the starter come Big Ten play, or that that's even in Indiana's best interest if you're looking at what makes next year's team, achieve closest to its ceiling.
Yeah, I think what people like there, and it goes back to what we talked about before, where, Devonte has been more of a combo guard really at every step of the way since he's been at IU. And I think people look at Robert Fennessy and say, this is a true point guard. And so to a certain extent, that becomes more alluring to people. And in some ways I've got this inconsistent guy and the allure of the unknown compared to that. It's like the backup quarterback scenario, right? Where favorite guy in town when somebody else is struggling. It's easy to get roped into that, but you've also got to think about, look, there are a lot of point guards that come in as freshmen in college. No matter how good they were, really the elite of the elite are those who can really step in early and play and be able to do the things that they want to do and run a team and understand what that means. So I tend to fall in your camp that I think this team is best served if Devonte is playing well enough to, hold him off in the short term and let him get brought along slowly. And that probably is, if that happens, that's probably a normal course of development for Fennessy. And I think a good sign for how Devonte is playing. I think if it gets to a point where you're really pushing, Rob Fennessy in early on, it's probably a sign that things haven't gone according to plan, would be my guess. And at least that's kind of the way that I view it at this point. I mean, he's a solid recruit. Everybody's excited about him, but there have been elite level 5-star, some 4-star guys who have come in early and been given the keys and really struggled to be able to handle that.
It's like starting
somewhere. Al Durham is listening to this being like, what the hell, guys?
No, it's like, well, we know Al listens, I'm sure. They all listen.
To be fair, Al was not proposing the questions to me. So
no, that's the fault of the host.
No, look, I think it's starting at point guard as a freshman in a major conference on a major conference college basketball team is like starting at quarterback in football as a freshman. It's hard. There's a lot going on. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but you're running the team, you're in charge, and sure, you're not getting hit. But at the same time, it's a difficult position to be in because you've got so many considerations going on with how to run the team, what you're doing. Are you running the offense, finding everybody, distributing, keeping everybody involved? And then on top of that, worrying about your own game, worrying about your own shot, worrying about the things that you need to do to get better for yourself while also making the team better. It's a tough situation. I don't see Rob Fennessy coming in and starting next year because of that. And I think that's good for the team if he does have to wait.
Yep. All right. Let's keep this conversation going. Coming up, we are going to continue our analysis of Devonte. We're actually going to dig into some stats. Found some numbers at Synergy, finding out what he did best, what he did worst, and then talking about what he needs to improve on next season. Stick with us on the Assembly Call. Okay, that was 15-17. Ryan, I believe is it story time?
I mean, it can be if you want. So this is I know some people are gonna think this is like there's some big story coming. This is just an example of who Kravitz is. So when I was the columnist at the Indiana Daily Student my senior year, so like 2005, 2006, Kravitz was the IU columnist for the Indy Star. And they had the columnist, and then Hutch, Terry Hutchins was the beat reporter. And Hutch was there every day at every practice, every game, whatever. And Kravitz would come down once a month for a practice or something, maybe go to a game occasionally, but he was not plugged in at all. And so he would come down, and because he was an IU guy and had gone to IU, he would come down and kiss up to all the college reporters. And so all of the IDS kids would be like, and I was a little older at this point, and I had heard that Kravitz was a bit of a jerk. So I didn't really care to like engage.
To catch yourself there. Well done.
Yeah, I'm trying. I don't want to get the show sued. I had heard that he was just kind of a bit of a jerk, and that, it wasn't worth my time to engage with him. So I would say hi to him, but then I would go walk away and interview a player or, do something else. And a lot of the college guys, whether it be for the yearbook staff who wound up getting credentialed that year, whatever, would stand around and talk. They're like, oh, it's the Indy Stars columnist. Let's hang out and talk with him. And what he would do is he would act like, oh yeah, guys, I like your stuff, blah, blah. He wouldn't be able to name any specifics because he didn't actually know anything. But then he would start asking questions about like what was going on with the team, because he clearly had no idea. He's like, well, what do you guys think of Marco Killingsworth? And they'd be like, well, in the last couple of games, he hasn't been playing well, and then this and that and the other thing. And we wrote a story about this like last week, and he'd be like, totally taking mental notes. And then, occasionally it was hilarious, because occasionally they'd be like, oh yeah, and then so-and-so's, to me, pointing to me, he'd be like, oh, Ryan's writing a column about this tomorrow. He's like, oh, that's a great angle. And then later that week, we'd find the exact same story in the Indy Star that he would legitimately just lift from us. And then there would be stuff in there in his stories that we had told him while sitting at practice. Like, well, Killingsworth, like, for example, what I just said, like, well, Killingsworth's really been struggling over the last week. I mean, it was like Ron Burgundy in the teleprompter. We could have told him anything, and he would have regurgitated it right in the middle of his columns, because he had no idea what he was doing, and it was never there. It was never plugged in. And so when I see this crap from him the other day, I'm just like, that's so classic him. He has no idea what he's talking about. He doesn't know what's legal, what's illegal, what actually goes on in college basketball. It's just, I don't know. It was just pretty classic Kravitz. I mean, I was just kind of like, yeah, well, that's Kravitz for you. Like, it's because that's what I saw when I was a college kid who would have died to like have his job or any job or have a recommendation for a job or anything. And I just looked at him and I was just like, this guy is so garbage. Like, it's ridiculous. And he was one of the most famous columnists in the country at that point, because the Indy Star was such a huge paper at the time. Like, not that it isn't now, but I don't know. He was one of those guys who would be on national radio talking about Indiana and have no idea what he was talking about. Like,
So
go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, how did he get to the position he's in? I don't really know like his history. I don't have a long.
I mean, he'd been around forever, and I think that he just worked his way up. And he went to IU, and he was an IDS guy, and so I don't know. I think he just worked his way up, and I don't know if it was a situation where he was more involved years before and then just was mailing it in at the end. But he was never there and would act like he was the authority on Indiana. And to Greg Doyle's credit, he's worked really hard getting involved with Indiana. I'll give Greg Doyle a lot of credit. When he first came, it felt like Kravitz because he wrote that his first column was about Tom, ripping Tom Crean and saying he should be fired because some guys got caught drinking or whatever. It's like, dude, if you're not paying attention to that program and you're just coming in and saying something, that's not the way you operate. Get to know the program before you make definitive statements like that. And Doyle has, and he's done a really good job. Yeah. It's pretty much the anti-Kravitz there, though, because Kravitz had nothing to do with the school and would come down and make these bold pronouncements about everything. I mean, he was the guy. It was so funny because he hadn't been there in, I think, 2 months when Mike Davis resigned. And he was the guy nationally, he and Pat Forty. And Forty was there, look, he covers Louisville, Kentucky area. And so he would come up to Indiana a couple times a month and just check in basically. But so they would have him nationally, which makes sense because he's a guy who's super plugged in and would be there. But they were having Kravitz on all these national shows talking about Mike Davis. He had no idea what he was talking about how he's like, well, the team really lost faith in Mike Davis. That ain't what happened. The team loved Mike Davis. The problem is the team just didn't play well for Mike Davis. But he was saying oh, this team wants a new coach. This team is doing this, team's doing that. It's like, no, that's not the story at all, Bob. But yeah, I don't know. Just, that's Bob Kravitz. That's who he is. And that's what he's always been.
Is story time with Ryan, our favorite between segment feature here at the Assembly Call.
Yeah, that or post show feature, right?
Yeah, well, usually we save the Assembly Call after dark is a little bit, more off color.
It's a little more blue. We go blue.
Yeah. All right, are we ready to dive into some numbers here about Devonte? I'll throw some of these out and get your guys' reaction to them, and then let's talk about just scouting report type stuff. Strengths and weaknesses, what he needs to improve on.
How Ryan loves it when you throw out a bunch of stats. So
I know.
I'll be over here sleeping, guys. I'll get my pillow.
No, I'm gonna keep it quick. I'll pick out a few of them. Feel free to interrupt me.
He'll be over there stabbing his Coach K voodoo doll. It'll be fine.
This can be very conversational. This doesn't need to be station to station broadcasting here. This can be a nice flowing conversation.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, let's do this. We'll try and keep this segment to 12, 13 minutes, thereabouts.
Okay,
here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Go to assemblycall.com right now to learn how to subscribe to our email newsletter, or you can simply text IU to 66866. If you want to get more out of being an IU basketball fan, then you need to be on our newsletter list. You will get our weekly Six Banner Sunday news roundups, as well as our post-game analysis emails once the season begins. It is all free, and it will make you a smarter IU basketball fan. Go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866. I am Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and this week we are beginning our offseason player-by-player analysis, where each episode we take one player, go in depth. This week we're talking about Devonte Green, and we spent our last segment kind of talking generally about our confidence level in him and in this possibility for him having a breakout as a junior. Guys, for this segment, I wanted to put some numbers to what we saw last year and just kind of see if that confirms what we saw, or maybe if it's a little different than what you would expect. And so, went into synergy and tried to find out what Devonte did really well on both offense and defense and what he really struggled with. And so, when you look at him offensively, overall offensively, in terms of possessions that ended with him having the ball, it was not a positive. It was 0.752 points per possession, which was in the 22nd percentile nationally. So not good. Now, when you include possessions that he assisted on, the efficiency rank rises to 43%. So a big part of his value last year was obviously in his assist rate. And that's clearly something that matches the eye test when you watch him play. I thought it was interesting that his free throw percentage stayed the same. It was, I think, 70.6% as a freshman, 70.5% last year. which I think, Brian, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but I think a big concern for him last year was those shooting numbers falling. But the fact that his free throw shooting stayed the same would kind of suggest that there isn't necessarily an underlying issue with his stroke. It's maybe more of a shot selection type thing, maybe getting better shots in the offense, not forcing shots. Do you kind of get that? Did you get that sense watching him? Because he's a guy who shot pretty well as a freshman, but obviously fell off last year.
Yeah, I think that he was taking more shots, and I also think he was relied on to take shots, and that leads to sometimes forcing things. And I thought he did force things at times last year. I thought when he settled in, and we've talked about this with him many times, and I mentioned in the last segment, when he just kind of relaxes and doesn't try and force things, he's actually a pretty good player. But the problem is reining that in, and that's not his best quality is control. And so I would say that I think that it is definitely a shot selection thing, and something that happens when you take more shots is you get a green light and you start forcing things. And that was not his role the year before.
And here's something that I thought was interesting with the numbers, because this is a guy that we are talking about, Andy, as someone who should have the ball in his hands a lot and initiating offense. Well, if you look at where he succeeded last year, he was actually better in spot-up situations, so where he was actually receiving a pass. He was in the 74th percentile in terms of efficiency when he, received a pass and either shot it or basically took one dribble and shot it. And he was much better shooting off of the dribble than he was with no dribble. But from a concerning standpoint, as a ball handler in the pick and roll, his efficiency was in the 21st percentile. Not good. 59 points in 100 possessions. And in transition, when he was the ball handler in transition, 53 points in 67 possessions, which was in the 14th percentile. So if he is going to have this breakout that we're talking about and be a guy who is, the primary ball handler, the point guard on a team with a lot of offensive options, he is going to have to get better in those situations when he's got the ball in his hands. Now, you would assume that he would get better with better talent around him, more time in the system, but those numbers do throw a little bit of cold water on some of the things that we talked about in that last segment about feeling more confident in him being ready to break out.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of that is trying to make the spectacular play versus otherwise. I think a lot of the transition ones, just as you think back to plays where he just tried to make what would have been an amazing pass if it gets to the guy he wants to get it to, and he is able to catch it and score. But I think more often than not, it was just keeping it simple, same stuff that we talked about. It is really just hit singles. You don't need to hit home runs every time, and really just try to again, like Ryan said, he's a guy you need to rein in, but you have to find that right balance of you can't totally put handcuffs on him and say, hey, you can't go and do these things. So we saw plays that he was able to make in pick and roll situations. We talked about that, the pass to Freddie McSwain at the end of the Iowa game was a great pass, but I think too often just trying to be spectacular. And in some ways, last year's team almost needed spectacular things to happen offensively in order to really feel good about what was going on. And again, I kind of go back to some of the initial thoughts I had on him earlier. That shouldn't be the case this year. And so if he's able to recognize that and just slow down just enough to handle those kinds of decisions and know what he wants to do with the ball and what the smart play is at any given moment. And I think those are the kinds of things that Archie can help him with, being a former point guard. And I think those are the things that they probably clash over a little bit the most, as you look at, he was one of the guys that it felt like Archie was not necessarily hardest on in kind of post-game comment scenarios, but he had a pretty short leash, I felt like, with him most of the time. There was one game he played, just played 4 minutes.
That was the Purdue game, in the midst of a lot of really good games for him too.
And so I think, I think there's a natural clashing there of the way those two guys play the game. And so I think it'll be interesting to see their relationship develop, but a good thing that he didn't leave and wants to come back and sees value in the kind of coaching that he's getting. But I could definitely see where you kind of look at it as the coach, you look at the guy and like, this guy isn't really that much like me. I need to get him to play a little bit more like me and kind of accentuate the good things that Devonte does and the unique skills that he has, while also trying to rein him in a little bit. And that's a huge challenge for a coach. And I think that's one that, again, you kind of talk about point guards over time. If there really is that maturation process with him, I think this is the year that if you don't see it this year, you're not going to see it. We're not going to have this conversation again next year. If he puts up numbers similar to what he did last year, because I don't think the conversation will make any sense at that point. At that point, the we haven't seen it argument is, throw that down and walk out of the room.
Yeah, I think that Andy touches on something there, and it's that Archie Miller is super. He expects a lot of Devonte because the talent's there, and you can tell he's frustrated. And it feels like that Devonte is sort of like the white whale, and Archie's Ahab right now, and that's just going to be their relationship. And he's going to be the guy that probably is the most frustrating, but it's also the most rewarding when a guy like that succeeds. And so that's where you make your money as a coach, is making those guys succeed and pushing them to the next level. One thing about Devonte I wanted to add is those numbers on pick and rolls, that in the 21st percentile, and in transition the 14th percentile. What I would say about that is that says to me that his decision making is not great. And if you're not making good decisions on the pick and roll, you're not making good decisions in transition, you're not doing well as a point guard. I mean, those are two of the most important things you can do, especially in modern basketball. Quick points are so big, and pick and roll. I mean, it's something that is the simplest play you can run, but it's also one of the most effective if you do it right. Part of the pick and roll issue is that IU didn't have great pure post options. So I would say, and everybody would overplay on Juwan Morgan because they knew that he was going to be the outlet for it. So that makes it tough. But at the same time, as that ball handler, you have to make the right decisions and get those easy buckets, which is, something he didn't do last year, clearly by the numbers.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, talking about Devonte Green as we begin our offseason player-by-player breakdown. We've spent a lot of time talking about Devonte, and almost the entire conversation, in fact, pretty much the entire conversation, has been shaded toward offense. That's all we have talked about. And obviously the offense is going to be important, but this is a coach with a defensive mindset. And this still feels like a team and a program where your ability to defend is what's going to determine whether you get on the court more than anything. And so we need to spend a little bit of time talking about Devonte's defense, because it was, when you look at the numbers on Synergy, it was better than what I expected. And it's not that I expected them to be bad, because Devonte had his moments as a defender, but he was, in a lot of ways, as inconsistent on defense as he was on offense. And he would bring it some games and be absolutely outstanding, and other games the focus wouldn't be there. But overall, the numbers are certainly better. We know the steal rate is good. He had a steal rate of 2.7% last year, which for context was 12th in the Big Ten. That's solid, and that's consistent with what he did as a freshman. So he's a guy who makes plays, he creates turnovers, and creates offense going the other way. Obviously, he needs to get better with the decision-making in transition when he gets those steals, but he is making those plays. And in terms of his strengths as a defender, Ryan, we mentioned his struggles on offense in the pick and roll, but he's been very good guarding pick and roll ball handlers. Gave up only 50 points in 75 possessions. That's the 71st percentile. And then in isolation situations, a little bit smaller of a sample size, 30 possessions, but he was in the 86th percentile, only allowing 16 points. So in those situations, he was good. Now, he struggled a little bit defending spot-up situations and off screens, and I think that gets to maybe a little bit of the lack of focus, losing his man, losing kind of recognition of his space on the floor where the screens are coming from.
Communication with teammates, too.
That too. And a lot of that will come with the new defensive system. But he's a guy, when you see him engaged on the ball and really playing with that mentality that he needs defensively, I thought a lot of times that you could tell how he was going to play more by how he was engaged defensively than what you saw offensively. And I thought one would lead into the other. And so if we're looking for what he can build on, or what we should really base any thoughts of a breakout on, I almost feel like we need to start with the defense. We've kind of started all with the offense, but I think if he's going to truly be a consistent player on this team, playing a lot of minutes, he's going to have to continue the defense that he played last year and build on it, because it was already decent to good. And if he can get to, becoming a really good or even great defender as an upperclassman, that will be a huge example to set for the young guys. And it obviously does wonders, as we saw with Yogi as a senior. When your lead guard is out there applying that kind of pressure, it really helps out everybody else.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the defensive end is where we all loved Devonte as a recruit. I mean, that was the thing he said. He wanted to be the best defender in the nation, and when you have a guy with that kind of mentality and who has, I think, put into practice a lot. I mean, Archie praised him early in the season, before the season started, actually, for his practice intensity defensively. And now that he's going to have to guard a guy like Rob Fennessy, maybe switch off in practice to some Romeo Langford, things like that, he's going to have to continue to step those things up. And it's only going to make him better, but he's got to embrace that challenge to know that practice is work. That's where you get it done, and that's where you get better. And he's got to understand that he's got to put that effort into practice. And apparently he has. Well, everything we've heard has been that he's good in practice. The problem is when he transitions to games, he kind of sort of gets loose, and doesn't play within the system as much. But if he embraces those challenges and really says, hey, you know what? I can do this. I can get into this. I can improve all that stuff. I think that he has that opportunity to break out. And you're right. It starts at the defensive end first. Everything with IU under Archie Miller starts defense first. And so that's going to be a big deal next year. And I think the reason he got so much playing time was because of his defense this last year. So we'll see how it goes.
Let's also learn our lesson for these future player-by-player breakdowns and start on defense and not save it till the very end.
That's less fun
now.
That's less fun for the fans out there. Come on now. Everybody wants offense.
Andy, you want the last word on Devonte?
I mean, just defensively, the other thing, when you look at some of the off-ball and spot-up situations, I think some of that goes back to, the pack line and closeouts. That was something that the team struggled with a lot. He's a guy who doesn't have a ton of size. So as you think about what he needs to do from a, spacing and technique standpoint, how does that factor into it? But I think the focus that you mentioned is part of it. But certainly when his man has the ball, both the scenarios where he was most effective on offense are really applying that ball pressure, which is one of the other things that you're trying to do in the pack line. So I think at the point of attack, he can be really good. It's just a matter of maintaining that as he goes into other facets of the game and not getting kind of sucked in. And I think with most point guards, it's you're as a point guard, you can look really good if you have a really good supporting cast. And to go back to some of the offensive stuff, when you talk about pick and roll, some of it's decision making, some of it is the defense respecting the other guys that they have. I mean, the point of that is to basically say that you're making a pick between two guys. Well, defenses against IU last year were like, well, I'm going to sag in and I'm going to cut him off and I'm going to dare him to either thread the needle and make a pass for the screen or roll into the basket, or kick it out to a guy who I don't believe is going to make a shot. And so I think when you look at personnel, how much of that can make him look a little bit better, and maybe make those, singles and easier decisions actually pay off for him in a way they might not have a year ago. So I think supporting cast is going to play a big role, and certainly him playing under control is going to be a big factor. But I think he'll be aided by the guys around him in a way this coming year that maybe he wasn't a year ago.
And that's a great example of how numbers without context are meaningless. So we like to bring you the numbers, but more importantly, we like to put them in context. And Andy, you did a wonderful job of doing that there. All righty, coming up, it is our final segment. We will answer your questions. We got this really fun question from Florida Hoosier. On this upcoming year's team, what practice matchup do you think Coach Miller will enjoy watching the most? Noodle on that. We'll talk about it when we come back.
Well, I lived on the outskirts of town.
All right, 15:37. That segment went better than I thought it would. You guys did an awesome job of adding context and coloring in the numbers. That was good stuff.
No, that was good. I thought it was enough where we could hit strengths and weaknesses, but then try to get into kind of why those might exist. So
yeah, well, that's good. So I mean, I guess let's review this, and you listening, obviously, let us know if you have any thoughts. But I mean, this is kind of a general format that we can take with these offseason player-by-player breakdowns. Do you think it's better to do the general discussion first or to do the numbers first? Or do you think it depends on the guy?
I would think it depends on the guy.
Probably.
Because if it's someone like Justin Smith who didn't put up huge numbers across the board, let's talk about his value, what he brings, general discussion, then we can get into the numbers. If it's Jawan, I mean, numbers do say a lot. So,
yeah,
I think it would depend.
All right. Well, we don't have a ton of time here. We're at 3. We got about 3 minutes, and
let's answer the first question. And that's it.
That's basically all we're going to do. That is all we are going to do. So we need to, at about 3:11, I'll start the outro. Yeah, because the other question is, once Archie has this established, what do you expect a 4-year run to look like for IU? The question's a little vague. And there's this one about dates, but if we don't get to it, I'll just tweet out the dates. Or if we need to fill some time at the end of the segment, I'll do it then.
Yeah, those are pretty easy to run down if we need to.
Yeah, get to the end. Okay, here we go. You guys ready?
Sure.
Here we go. You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Brian Phillips, wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball. It is time to answer your questions. We got a great one from Florida Hoosier on Twitter. So let's hop into that one right now. On this upcoming year's team, what practice matchup do you think Coach Miller will enjoy watching the most? I will say that the obvious one that jumps out to me, because Archie Miller is a point guard, and so I have to think that just because he can probably relate best with point guards, I have to think he is just absolutely licking his chops to watch Devonte Green go at Romeo Langford or go at Robert Fennessy. And, mix Al Durham in there too, but to watch those guys, and kind of see some of this young point guard talent and see how it develops. I think he would enjoy watching that just because he likes watching point guards. Obviously, if the guys don't develop like he wants, it's probably one of those things where he enjoys it, but it also probably angers him and frustrates him more than any other because he has the highest level of expectation for it. So maybe it would be easier to say he will enjoy anything that Romeo Langford does on the court the most. But I'll stick with point guards. Andy, what do you think would be the one that he would enjoy the most?
Oh, boy, I don't know. Maybe McRoberts on Romeo Langford, the defensive stopper from a year ago. I think Archie would probably relish seeing if he could get under his skin a little bit. I don't know. The point guard one is one that I thought of, but I thought the McRoberts and Romeo was under the radar.
Or just to recognize how far he's come in 1 year from Zach McRoberts being the second most important player on the team to now having Romeo Langford on the roster.
No, my answer was going to be one of two, and it was Zach McRoberts on Romeo Langford to see if a savvy defender like Zach McRoberts, who, by the way, a lot of people were talking about as a potential all Big Ten defender last year for a stretch of the season. That chatter kind of fell off late, but that was a big deal. Archie was too. But the other one I want to see, and this, you wouldn't think of this positionally, I don't think, but I think they will face off in practice because of their size, is Romeo Langford and Justin Smith.
Mm-hmm.
That's where Archie's going to be like, oh, I'm at Indiana now. I can get these kinds of athletes and players. I think that's the big one for me. And, or even Justin Smith and Jerome Hunter, those guys, you just, to look at the difference between some of those Dayton teams and last year's team and what he's going to have on the floor in practice this year is just going to be unbelievable.
Yeah, I think Justin Smith, Jerome Hunter will definitely be a fun one. And I also think, I think if you can get Deron Davis back healthy and then you've got him down low banging with Race Thompson and Jake Forrester and get, Clifton Moore involved in there, that's one that he will enjoy too, just because of the options that would present, having that kind of depth down low. So, look, we've pretty much named every player, and that's the nice part about this increased roster is there's stuff for the coach to enjoy.
It's going to be fun, everybody.
I'm ready for games. I am ready for games.
I know. How many months we got? We should put a countdown clock on the site.
There's a lot. We do need a countdown clock. Still.
Luckily, we'll have a fall trip to Bloomington to sort of break it up.
That's right. Ooh, you're teasing that.
I'm teasing.
Okay.
Well,
we'll have more details to come on that.
I'm willing it to happen. So.
I like it. All right. That'll do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording, or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, go to assemblycall.com/join to join our free email newsletter or text IU to 66866. Thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. And cut. Nice work, fellas.
Where'd we come in at?
We're a little bit over, but I haven't been quite as precise on the timing, but it hasn't been an issue. So I think we can be 10 to 20 seconds off in either direction. I don't think it makes a huge difference.
We had a Louisville.
I can edit it down a little bit too.
We had a Louisville fan in the chat. I posted his message.
Nice.
He said he loved the show.
Hey, that's awesome.
Welcome to all. Unless you're in West Lafayette, then. Ugh.
Hey.
Sorry. For those who don't know, that's Jerod's hometown. So.
No, it is not my hometown. Not
I
my
know.
hometown.
I know
It's
it's-
the
I
place
know
that
it's
went to
not.
high school.
I know it's not.
And it's a great high school. It's a good city. I like a lot of the folks up in West Lafayette. Good people.
Now, did you actually live in West Lafayette, or were you in
Yeah, West
regular Lafayette? Okay, yeah.
We
'Cause I know
we
there's
lived
like
in Lafayette the first year and a half, and then we
Okay.
moved over to
because I
West
know there's like a dividing line. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I was a river rat over on the other side,
Oh.
West Lafayette.
I mean, did it take you like 2 years to scrub off the cow manure smell when you moved to college, or?
No, because I went right to Bloomington, and so that just immediately brushes it all off of you.
Oh, okay.
You know, you go into the cleansing air of Bloomington, and you're fine.
I will
If
say
I'd
it's
gone
really-
anywhere else, yeah, it would have taken 2 years, but I went back. I was
So-
immediately forgiven.
My mom teaches cooking classes in West Lafayette when she tours through Indiana, and has a really good friend there. And he has 3 degrees from IU, and all his kids go to IU, but he lives and owns a cooking school in West Lafayette. He used to be a lawyer. He got a journalism degree, master's in journalism, and then a law degree from IU. And she has a class and it sells out every time she's there because she's very popular there. And there are people in the class who listen to our show.
Really?
Like a solid group of people who are always in the class who listen to our show. So
That's awesome.
we do reach West Lafayette.
That is awesome. Yeah, we
We're
have one of our longest listeners, Andy, who we met the very first meetup
yeah?
that we did.
Of course.
He's from up there. Yeah,
Wow.
there's a strong loyal pocket of IU fans up in West Lafayette. Got to stay strong up there.
We're slowly expanding our reach.
We are slowly but surely.
So Jerod's going to be.
I
here
will be
next week?
in San Diego. I won't be on the show, but I will.
Neither will I.
I will be in San Diego. That's right. You're not going to be on the show either.
I'm going to be getting you hammered.
After my daughter goes to sleep at 5:00 in the afternoon.
Yes.
So Andy will be hosting. Michael's going to be here, and then we'll figure out who else will be coming. We'll figure out what we want to do. Maybe we'll save the off-season player breakdown stuff, unless you guys want to do that.
Well, with Michael,
I guess we'll just have to see what news breaks.
you can definitely talk about Romeo with Michael. Like, what's the vibe on campus? I think he's a good.
Is he still there? Or does he go home for the summer?
Well, he's got
he
an
has an
internship with ESPN.
but
this
it's
summer.
not till later in the summer, though.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he's on campus or not, but still, I mean, there was buzz before he even committed, so.
I mean, do we really need to ask a student if there's buzz about Romeo? Like,
Well, not even that, but like as a student, what's the level of excitement that you get to go watch him in person every,
there you
couple
go.
times a week, like things like
Yes.
that. Not necessarily like, ooh, do people know who Romeo Langford is?
Yeah.
It's been mentioned. Yeah.
Hey, were people excited on campus when Romeo committed? Remember that?
Remember that? It was really cool.
That was awesome.
So, Jerod, we should do we have the schedule for things like Hoosier Hysteria and stuff? Because you were talking about maybe doing it for.
It hasn't been announced yet.
When does it get announced?
It'll be a lot sooner than Crean used to announce it. We know that. Last year it was announced way sooner. So I wouldn't anticipate it being too long. The next time Archie's speaking publicly is the 30th for Huber's Winery.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll be announced by then, but I mean, we should know pretty soon.
Okay, because if it's going to be like August, then there's no way we have to plan way earlier than that. I think so. Yeah.
It's usually October.
Okay. No. I mean the date he announces.
Oh.
No, this isn't Crean. We're gonna know everything way sooner.
All right. I'll hold you
Way
to that.
sooner.
Yeah, because we should just find out when we found out last year, and
Yeah, I'll go look.
so we know.
Inside the Hall, have a
Because if not, then we'll just pick a Saturday close to the season.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's on a Saturday and it coincides with a football game, and then we can
Yeah.
just hang out all day. And then I think last year they played. Was it at Michigan State, or did they have a home game the day of Hoosier Hysteria?
I don't remember.
I get them mixed up. I know one year it was. I think they played a road game. I don't remember what it was last year. Anyway,
Yeah, I don't remember last year.
We'll go look. We'll look and see, because that would be really fun to do.
Yeah.
So
that'd be
fun. All right, so I'm gonna see you. I'm gonna tell my daughter to save her most wonderful diaper for you, so that can be your first one.
Nope, not changing the diaper.
We're
Sorry,
gonna do it. We're gonna
not happening.
We're gonna
Sorry.
broadcast it live on Periscope, YouTube.
Nope.
Just to watch you look on helplessly, not
Oh,
knowing what to do.
Look, I've been
having
involved
nothing
in
to say.
I've been involved in poop explosions, plenty of them. Come on.
That is going on the bragging montage. That right there.
Involved
Yeah.
in poop
No,
explosion.
Hey, at least I didn't drop an S word, so you can use it. No, I've been around tons of toddler crap, but I have not. It's almost like I'll clean up, I'll help, like whatever. But it's almost like now it's just sort of a thing that I won't change a diaper. Like it's kind of, I'd probably be fine with it, but I don't know. No, I'm not going to do that.
Dude, no one likes changing diapers. It's not like
Yeah, but it's your kid. If it was my kid, I would, but it's your kid. I'm not going to clean
you
up.
won't like it. It's not. There's not really.
Oh, this is so wonderful. It's a
Yeah.
pile of shit.
I mean, it can be a nice bonding time, though. You know, it's a
Especially
good.
when they
It's
start-
can be a
when they
good time to connect.
peeing on you. So one of my favorite things that happened when my my sister and her kids were here with my brother-in-law. So my sister has 4 kids, for those of you who don't know, an 8-year-old, 2 3.5-year-old twins, and a 1.5-year-old. And the 3.5-year-old are boy-girl twins, Sonny and Tilly. And we were hanging out at my apartment complex. My apartment complex has a bowling alley. So they came over and the kids were all bowling. And we're standing there, and it's a really nice area. It's brand new. It's like, you kind of like looking around with kids, making sure they're not destroying anything. And my sister looks at Sonny and she goes, Sonny, did you go pee-pee? And he's like, yeah, in my pants. Just like it was the most natural thing in the world. And it was just like, oh, son of a bitch. So stripping over again. It's like 2 PM in this really nice, like bowling alley lounge area. And there's people around. She just grabs his pants, takes them off. He's just nothing below the waist, completely naked. She like walks him, doesn't carry him, walks it because he's wet, walks him to the bathroom, completely naked from the waist down. And people are just sitting there like, what the hell is happening? There's a naked boy running around in this bowling alley. And luckily she had a backup pair of pants. So yeah. Did you go pee-pee? Yeah, in my pants. I was like,
Everything that you just said there is being chopped up into individual.
that's totally fine. I was like,
As it
was
should
like,
be.
yeah, that's fine.
A lot of it.
But that was just like, I legitimately was looking up vasectomy surgeries after that day.
Yeah, I guess it's awesome, man. You should seriously try it though, kids.
I like being an uncle. I'm good with that.
It's the best.
Oh, I'm sure it's wonderful.
All right. So Andy, we'll be in touch next week and get everything planned out.
What day do you get here? Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah, Wednesday, like around noonish or so.
Cool.
And
then when are you leaving?
Sunday.
Okay.
Sunday. So let me know what your schedule is, and we'll try and.
Yeah, my parents.
Our schedule is going to be pretty open. I mean, we want to go to the beach. And we want to go to the zoo one day. And if you have any ideas for fun stuff for I mean, she's not even 2 yet.
Are the Padres in town?
We're not going to go to a baseball game.
He said fun. What?
Yeah.
Dude, that ballpark is fun.
Just said.
No, but I mean, I might let her watch your Twitter though, in case she's curious how the Padres are doing, so she can get all the
it's,
stuff.
Schadenfreude. They play the Dodgers next weekend. Yeah.
Now we're gonna spend a lot of time at the beach.
Yeah, that's I'll tell you the best beaches to go to, with kids.
Okay, yeah, that'd be good.
And then I'm sure my parents will want to take you out to lunch or something. I mean, I'll go with you, but since my parents have never met you.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. All right, well yeah, let's we'll figure out what else is going on.
All right, sounds good to me.
All right, gentlemen.
Later,
Always
guys.
fun talking. Thank you all for being here live. We'll be back next week and every week this offseason.
Adios.
Sounds good.
Adios.
See you.